Hey everybody, it's Amanda, and I'm here in my studio this afternoon with some information for you. I've got some supplies that I want to talk to you about. I've had lots of emails and private messages and direct messages just asking questions about what do I need to get started. So if you're new to painting, especially if you're new to palette knife painting, if you're wanting to do some work that is in the same type of technique that I use, then I thought it would be a great idea for me to just tell everybody in a live video what kinds of things you need to get started, because that seems to be a question that everyone is asking. So I'm going to show you some of the basic things that you need to get started, and it's not as much as you might think. So painting with acrylic is a lot simpler than painting with oils. With oils, you need all kinds of different solvents and cleaners and things. But with acrylics, you basically just need your paint, whatever surface you're going to paint on, and water, soap and water to clean up. So, and then of course your utensil, whatever you're going to use to actually do the painting. So that's what I'm just going to show you some examples of some things. And if you have questions, then this would be a great time for you to ask those questions. I know I've answered some messages to some of you who have asked questions about what do I need to get. I've sent you some links and things like that, but I thought it would be great just to hop on here, do a video, and that way everybody can see it, and maybe I can answer some questions that someone hasn't had time to sit down and type out an email and ask. So we'll just begin with paint, because that is the most important part, right? And the way that I paint, let me see, we'll just use an example. The way that I paint is very textured. The paint goes on really thickly. Some people call it impasto. I don't use really heavy, thick textures, but I do have enough texture that it stands up a little bit from the surface. Can you see that? There's some little ridges in there. So in order to do that, you've got to have the right kind of paint. Hi, Jennifer. So if you're wanting to learn to paint like I do, then you're going to need a heavy-bodied acrylic paint. Now, oil paints, I don't paint with oil paints most of the time. I've been playing around with it a little bit, but it's not really. It's really pretty and soft and buttery, but I really still love my acrylics the most because they're so easy. You don't have to do anything to the paint to make it work. If you buy paint that is in a tube, okay, let's do this. This paint in a bottle is going to cause you lots of frustration if you're trying to paint with a palette knife using it. This is what I started out with, just a regular craft paint. But if you're trying to use this and use the same methods that I use with my painting knives, then you're going to get a little bit frustrated. This still works if you mix it with a gel medium. Now, a gel medium is just like a thickening agent that you can add to your acrylic paint, and it will make it thicker. It's still not going to be as good as this. I'm going to show you several different things, because it doesn't really matter what brand you're using as long as it's in a tube and not in a bottle. Okay, so I use all kinds of different brands of paint right now. I've got, I don't know how many different brands of paint, but as long as it's in a tube, it's going to come out thicker than what is in a bottle. Okay, and the reason why that's important is because if you're using this to paint with, this is a palette knife. This is what I paint with almost 99% of the time when I'm painting. you've got to have paint that's thick enough that it's going to stick to this knife. So if your paint is really runny, then it's just going to run right off of your knife. So it's going to be frustrating. It's going to make it harder for you to paint if your paint is not thick enough. So supply number one needs to be thick paint. Whether you buy it in a tube where it's already thick, and let me show you, see if I can do this. When it comes out, it is very thick, see? Almost like toothpaste. So you can either go ahead and get that kind of paint, or if you already have craft paint and you don't want to just go and buy a whole bunch of new paint, then you can just buy yourself some of this. It's called gel medium, and you can mix it with your craft paint and thicken it up. So this is almost completely empty, but you can see there in the lid, it's just like, it's like clear paint. It's basically the same material that they make the paint from. There's just no pigment in it. So it dries clear. It doesn't change the color of your paint when you mix it with it. It doesn't make it lighter. So this is not white, it's clear. It just thickens it up. Okay? So you need good paint, thick paint, and a palette knife. So, and you guys, if you have questions while I'm talking, you can go ahead and type them in the comments, and I'll try to come back and answer those as best I can. So, number one, you need good paint that's thick enough to stick to your knife. Number two, you need a palette knife. And there are tons of different kinds. So I'm going to just show you a few. All right, there's this one. There are some that are rounded on the tip, more circular in shape. And each one of these has a different function. So here's another knife. Some of these I use all the time. Some of these I hardly ever use at all. I'm going to show you the one that I use the most last. See, this is a really weird one. You can make cool textures with some of these different strange shapes that we've got on these knives. Here's another one that's got like a wavy side on it. And here's a little one. But this one is the one that I use almost all the time. You can tell by how it looks. It has this really pointy tip on it, and that helps me to get in little crevices, to make little details. This is my favorite knife, and it's just the triangular tipped knife. It's really simple. So honestly, if you just have paint and one of these and some sort of surface to paint on, that's all you need to get started. It's not very much. And if you have craft paints, I would really encourage you just to use what you have and use it up until you can move on and get something new. So I have a little circular paint holder that I keep all my paints in, a little container. And I just recently cleaned it out and took out the craft paints that were in there. So I've been using craft paint for a really long time and mixing it with my gel medium to thicken it up. And then as I would run out of one, I would replace it with one of these in the tube. So if that is the route you want to go, then that's fine. If you don't already have a lot of paint and you want to go ahead and start with this, then you're going to get a little bit of a head start, and this will probably help you with your techniques to go ahead and start with this kind of paint. Now, as far as palette knives go, you can also get these plastic ones, which are really cheap. You can get them at Walmart, probably dollar stores have them. However, they are so flexible that it also will make your work a little harder to master. So I'm going to show you the difference here. The tip of this, if I were to try to press to put some paint down. Do you see how much that moves? It's really, really wiggly. Where this one is much stiffer. I mean, I'm really pressing hard on that. So the tools that you use, if you can't get something like this to begin with, it's okay. You got to start somewhere. But it may be a little more frustrating, so I want you to know that ahead of time. It may be a little bit harder for you to do some of the things that you want your knife to do if you're not using one of the metal ones. So if you're using a plastic knife and you're using craft paint and you're using just what you have on hand, I don't want you to feel like you're so frustrated because you can't get it to do what you want it to do. I just want you to know it's because of your supplies. So either be a little more patient with yourself and add that gel medium and see if you can get it to thicken up and work for you a little better, or go ahead and buy a few tubes, not bottles, a few tubes of really good paint that's going to really help you get started. So your thick paint and your palette knife are your two main supplies that you need to get started. You really only need one palette knife, and I would suggest that you get one like this with the pointed tip if you're only going to get one. And then you also need just a small paintbrush of some kind. It does not matter what kind it is, just something with a small tip on it. It can be square, it could be round. That's what I use most of the time just to get started and kind of sketch out whatever the subject is that we're going to be painting. So I'll take my brush and a paint color, kind of just sketch out where things are going to be on the canvas or on the paper, and then I use my knife to really get in there and do all of the painting. Okay. Let's see what you guys are saying here. Terry says, will the tube say heavy bodied? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But if you have to squirt it out of a tube, then it's going to be heavy enough for you to use with your knife. Most of the time, let me see. For example, this is the same company, Liquitex. They make acrylic paints that are soft body, and they make the heavy body. And it's written on their bottles. But like Golden also makes, these are really, really great paints, by the way. They make a fluid acrylic, which is really runny. They make this also. I'm not sure. High flow acrylics is even more watery. And then they have their heavy bodied also. Let me see if they have, does it say heavy on here anywhere? Yeah, on the back it says heavy body acrylics on this, but some of these do not, like that one does say heavy bodied, heavy bodied. Some of them do, some of them don't. So the ones that are the most popular name brands, like this one is Artist Loft. It's the Michaels brand. It says professional heavy bodied acrylic on the back. For the most part, they're going to tell you that they're heavy bodied, but if they're in a tube, they most likely are. Let's see. Kelly is asking for a technique of hue with acrylics, gradation of hue with acrylics. So you're saying, explain to me what you're asking for as far as a technique goes. You're wanting to see mixing color from light to dark. Is that what you mean? Thanks, Annalise. She says she loved seeing the flower paintings that I've been doing lately. Kelly says, are there any products that slow the drying process? Blending is challenging. Okay, that is another thing. I've got some of that over here. Hang on just a second. There is a medium that you can use, if I can find it, that makes your paint dry more slowly. And it's called Slow Dry Blending Medium. So that's another great thing about acrylic paint, is that there are lots and lots of different mediums that you can add to it, that you can use with it. So you can add things they're gonna thicken up the paint. You can add things that are gonna thin the paint. You can add things that are gonna slow the drying of the paint. So if you're used to oils, which take a really long time to dry, and you're not really used to how fast the acrylic paint does dry, then you could add some of this slow dry blending medium is what it's called, slow dry blending medium, and that will help. But I like the fact that acrylics dry so fast. I like to paint kind of quickly, and so I move quickly, and I want to be able to layer my paint. So I don't do a whole lot of blending. My backgrounds sometimes have some blending in them, but when I work with the palette knife, I don't do a whole lot of blending. So let me see if I can find an example. If I can get this over here. So, for example, in this one, like these yellows and whites that are here, those are just layered on there. So with acrylics and my knife, what I can do is take a dark color and put it down. Then in just a minute, pick up a lighter color and swipe it on top, and it kind of blends a little bit, but it's not like with a brush where you're constantly blending and taking a lot of time to create all of the dimension that is there. So when I'm working with my knife, I work really quickly and layer. I really just kind of lay another color on top of the one that I just put down. So I like that my acrylic paints dry quickly. Okay. Okay, Kelly said yes. So she's wanting to see, I don't have everything set up to do that, but I'm planning, I'll go ahead and tell you this now, because I'm almost done anyway, and I was going to tell you at the end. I'm planning on doing a little series this week. So we're going to talk about several different things. I thought we would start with just the basic supplies that you need today, and then we'll talk about palette knife work, and I'll do some demonstrations for you. Then we'll also do a little bit of mixed media work, and I'll do a demonstration for you. We'll talk about paint and surfaces, and that will be a good time for me to show you the process of changing the colors of your acrylic paints. It's really a lot like oils as far as adding a color. It's really not any different. The only difference is what the binder is that's holding the paint pigments together. So if you mix oil paints, you can mix the acrylic paints the same way that you would oils. You just wouldn't use the same solvents, and you wouldn't use the same well, you could use the same techniques if you're using a palette knife to paint with oils, but anyway. And then we'll paint a flower on Friday. So this week we'll do something every day in a live video that will just be kind of like getting you started, teaching you what you need to know to just get going with this, because I know there are a lot of you who are interested and are a little bit hesitant because you're not sure about where to begin. So I thought this would be a great time to do that this week. So we talked about supplies today. Tomorrow we'll talk about palette knives. Then Wednesday we'll talk about mixed media. Thursday we'll talk about paint and different surfaces that you can paint on. And then on Friday we'll plan to paint a flower together. Let's see if you have any other questions. Okay, Sabrina says, what do you do to keep the paint from drying while you're working? There are stay wet palettes that you can use. I've got 2 different kinds, and they have, one has like a little sponge that you keep wet underneath a piece of paper, and that keeps your paint dry, and then you can close it up and it keeps for a really long time. And then there's also one that I have that's just plastic, but it has like it's almost like a Tupperware seal so that it keeps your paints wet too. Let's see. All right, everyone's asking what time, and yes, we'll do this on Facebook every day this week, and let's shoot for 12 noon. So I'm on Central Time. I'm in Florida, but I'm in the Panhandle, so we're on Central Time. I think we're probably like the only, never mind. It's just weird to me that this whole state there are 2 different time zones. So we'll do palette knife tomorrow at noon. We'll do mixed media on Wednesday at noon. We will talk about different ways you can use paint and surfaces to paint on Thursday at noon, and then Friday at noon we will do we'll just paint a flower together. Try to use a little bit of all of the things that we've learned this week, and it'll be here on my Facebook page, and hopefully everybody will learn something new and gain a little bit of confidence just to try this, because I think you'll really like it if you do. So to wrap up what we were talking about today, we said the basic things that you need are good paint, thick paint, a palette knife, and a small brush. That's really it. So whatever you want to paint on is up to you, whether it's canvas or paper or cardboard or wood or whatever. Acrylic paints can be applied to just about anything, and that's where you need to begin. All right. I don't see any other questions about what we've talked about so far. So I will see you guys again tomorrow at 12, and we will do some little demonstrations with the palette knife and let you see what that's like. And I'll try some different kinds of paints and let you see what I'm talking about when I say that you need to have some thick paint. So hopefully you guys will be able to join me tomorrow. And I'm hoping I'm not missing any comments or questions that you guys asked in this one. I think I got them all. Looks like. So if you're watching the replay and you ask a question, I'll try to come back and answer it too. But I think that's it for today, and I will see you guys tomorrow at noon. Bye.